Team Fantasy Podcast, and here we are, week 3,
Yeah.
going in with a lot of injuries. We got a lot of backups going, so pay heavy attention in this one. There's a lot of guys, especially starting in this first one, that are going to be questionable going into this one. And again, I want to say, before we get into this, that we're recording this a bit early. Both Derek and I have a bit packed
Yeah.
schedules this weekend. So we're trying to get in as much as we can before the weekend so we could get out some content for you guys.
Yeah.
That being said, with guys like Keenan Allen on the Bears side of the ball, I will read this report from Sleeper. Keenan Allen did not practice today. He was held out of practice and could potentially miss Sunday's game. He's battling a heel injury, and yeah, I mean, it says you should pay attention to Friday's report in regards to Keenan Allen. If he doesn't go, we saw DeAndre Carter last week get a heavy dosage of the snap percentage.
Mm-hmm.
He played 71% of the snaps, I believe. Yes, 71% from the 23 the previous week. As Derek said, in our very last episode covering the Sunday night game, Rome Odunze played 94% of the snaps, even going into the game with a questionable tag. So, should Keenan Allen miss, I think we'll just see a really healthy dose of targets to DJ Moore and Rome Odunze.
Yeah.
That being said, Chicago is only putting up 18 and a half points per game. Granted, it's only been 2 weeks, but through the first 2 weeks, they've only generated 176 and a half total yards per game. 99 of that coming through the air and 77 and a half of that coming on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to say if DeAndre Swift is going to get it done, this is going to be the week. And same for the pass attack. I mean, the Colts through the first 2 weeks are giving up 400 total yards of offense. So
Yeah.
we'll see. I mean, I believe, especially if Keenan Allen doesn't go, that Rome Odunze is a good start. You kind of have to start DJ Moore. I'm not starting Caleb Williams.
No.
Honestly, at this point, I don't think he's really worth a roster spot, just seeing how much pressure that they give up.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm still interested in DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen. Not so much Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
I'm kind of cool off of the Bears tight ends. They could end up being a waiver addition later on in the year, but for now, I'm going to leave that alone. As I said, DeAndre Swift should be good. We saw Josh Jacobs absolutely decimate them on the ground after it was obvious all week going into the game that the Packers were going to do nothing but run the ball, and they still couldn't stop it. While I think Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs are better pure running backs than DeAndre Swift, I still think he should be able to get a bit more production than we've seen out of him in the first 2 weeks. Oh,
Yeah.
and over under in this one's 43 and a half. The Colts are favored by a point and a half at home.
Yeah. And on the Colts side of the ball, we saw them pretty heavily underperform against the Packers. The Bears do have a pretty good pass defense. I mean, a defense in general, pretty solid. But Anthony Richardson, I feel like it's hard to keep him on the bench because his legs alone, if he does get in the end zone on the ground, he's going to get you at least 30 to 40 rushing yards a game. And again, if he does get in on the ground, he's going to have a solid fantasy week. So it's hard for me to keep him out of the lineup as well as Jonathan Taylor. When I go to the receivers, Michael Pittman's seen 15 targets. He's only caught 7 of them for 52 yards. It's a tough one. But it's also hard to be in a position where you have the luxury of taking a guy like Michael Pittman out of the lineup, especially if you're playing a 3 receiver league. If you're in a 2 receiver, I think there could be better options out there, especially if you do have some other options. But Josh Downs is coming back to this wide receiver room this week. So I'm curious to see the role he plays. I'm curious to see Alec Pierce. He's been the deep guy. He's cashed in both games. It's just I don't know. I literally just threw Ramondre Stevenson into my lineup and watched him dud me 20 minutes ago. And I'm not saying Alec Pierce is going to do so, but it is in the realm of possibilities. He had 2 monster weeks. That does not mean he's going to have another monster week. He's had 10 targets total through the first 2 weeks. Again, I'm just curious to see how much Josh Downs plays and how that shakes things up. So the wide receivers for the Colts, I'm a bit more shaky on than obviously Jonathan Taylor, mainly just because of Anthony Richardson. His accuracy, other than the deep ball, has not been there. So if you want to take the high flyer on an Alec Pierce, I don't completely hate it, but I am wary of any of the three Colts receivers in this one. And obviously, we're not looking at the tight ends. I do think Matt Gay could be a solid play. And I did talk about starting defenses against the Bears that can really get after the pass catcher. The Colts defense, though, I don't necessarily think I'm going to go to. I think there can be better options. I recommended them against the Packers, and they did a good job at getting the ball out early. We'll see, but I think there's better options. I don't know. I want to see the identity from the Colts this week. I want to see what they look like
Yeah.
fully healthy.
And I mean, it's just going up against another defense that is shown to be pretty tough through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. And as far as the like, because for example, I have the option to pivot from Michael Pittman Jr. to Alec Pierce if I wanted to. But I mean, just given the fact that it is only a 2 week sample size,
Mm-hmm.
and it'd just be a lot more hard or a lot more difficult to live with the decision of benching Michael Pittman for Alec Pierce should Michael Pittman finally have himself a game rather than the other way around. I mean,
Yeah,
and then on the other hand, if I see a third week in a row of Alec Pierce being out there for a
for sure.
majority of the snaps and, getting himself a majority of the targets, um, I think I'm definitely more comfortable with moving him at least into a week to week flex role.
Yeah, no, for sure. And our second game, at least the team I cover in this one, it's the Broncos at the Bucks. The over under is 41. The Bucks are favored by 6.5. The Broncos side of the ball, I'm gonna make it short and sweet. To be completely honest, barring significant injury that you have, like an Isaiah Pacheco or guys like that, I am staying away from starting anyone on the Broncos side of the ball until I can see some type of life from this offense. Javonte did have a decent week because of the pass catching out of the backfield, but he also has 19 attempts for 40 yards through 2 weeks. And we know the Bucks are capable of stifling the run game a little bit. So again, until I see some life from the Broncos, you shouldn't be in the position where you have to start one of the Broncos. I like even grabbing guys that you could have grabbed off the waiver wire and putting them in. I think a guy like a Quentin Johnston or someone like that potentially has, you know, a higher upside this week. So I'm steering clear of the Broncos. That's just my opinion, but I just don't like this offense.
Yeah, and I mean, I can agree. It's one that I think we have to sit back and wait more, especially when we're seeing possession receivers like Devon Vele and Josh Reynolds be the most valuable on the team from a week to
Mm-hmm.
week basis. It's looking like if Greg Dulcich could continue building some rapport with Knicks and getting targets like he did last week with the 8 targets, he could be a streaming tight end option. But yeah, I kind of agree with you as far as the Broncos side of the ball. Not really too much that I'm interested in. But obviously, looking at the Bucks, they're 6.5 point favorites at home. What we've seen out of them so far has been really good. Rashad White so far has missed both of the practices this week, or he was limited on Thursday, and there's
Yeah.
not too much information on that. If he's not able to go, if you have Rashad White, hopefully, if you haven't grabbed him yet and he's still available, let me actually check right now. I believe Bucky Irving. Here, let me just do a quick search for the people.
Yeah.
Bucky Irving
He's
is
probably gone up
available
a little bit.
in 43% of leagues. So in about half of the leagues on Sleeper, he is still available if you're able to go out and get him if you have Rashad White. Or even if you need a spot start option and Rashad White isn't able to go,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a bad option against the Broncos offense that's not able to perform much. So
Hmm.
the Bucks might end up running the ball quite a bit. That being said, I do still think they are going to throw the ball. They're currently 13th in pass yards per game with 213 a game. And the Broncos are giving up 277 yards per game, which is ninth. But we saw, I mean, in the game that they played the Seahawks, they did a pretty good job on DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Mike Evans is going to be locked down, but in that game, it did open up the field for Tyler Lockett, who happens to be playing a lot in the slot. Only the number one fantasy wide receiver this year, Chris Godwin. I think it's another smash start for him. Been wrong before, but I don't think we will be this time. I honestly think Godwin should perform well. And as far as the rest of the Bucks, I mean, I think Baker's a decent streaming option week in, week out. He's kind
Hmm.
of proving that, he's comfortable throwing the ball and he's doing well. Um, but yeah, outside of that, I mean, Kate Otton's playing. He played 100% of the snaps last week, but I'm not really interested in starting him.
Yeah.
If you would like to throw the Bucks defense out there, I think that might be a pretty decent option.
Hmm.
They picked off Jared Goff, or yeah,
Yeah.
they picked off Goff twice last week, right?
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, yeah. So,
Hmm.
and they're going against rookie quarterback Bo Nix this week on the road. So
Yeah.
that will take us into our next game.
There's some
Oh
gross
boy,
ones.
this one, yeah. So we have the Chargers going into Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. We have a projected point total of 36, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are favored by a point and a half. Vegas is
Yeah.
seen with these two teams, both 2-0, have done through the first two games, and that is run the ball and play very good defense.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we will see what happens. Currently, the Chargers are first in points per game allowed at 6.5, granted through 2 weeks, and the Steelers are second at 8. Chargers are have 24 points per game, Steelers 15. I mean, I really do think it's going to be a pretty gross game. The Chargers do have 197 rush yards per game through the first two games, and they've also allowed 227 yards per game. So although I went hard in the paint, self-admittedly, for Quentin Johnston this past week in waivers, I'm not saying it was for this week. I don't
Yeah.
really think any of the Chargers pass catchers are going to perform too well. If
Hmm.
this is the week you were expecting something from them, then I don't think they were the ones you should have gone for. Um, I mean, I think J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are both viable starts this week. I don't think J.K. is going to be as efficient on the ground. The Steelers have a great defense, but I think that's what this game is consisting of.
Yeah.
A whole lot of running the ball, and I think Gus and J.K. each are going to get at least like 15 carries. We'll see. We'll see if this game even reaches 36 points. I think if you need to, you could start Lad QJ, but I'd really try to avoid it. And same with Herbert.
Yeah, and it's a
Maybe Dicker, maybe
yeah,
Dicker in the defense.
yeah,
'Cause there could be a lot of field goals and a lot of defense in this one.
for sure. And on the Steelers side of the ball, it's a similar story. It seems like it's going to be Justin Fields again. And if the Steelers happen to win this game, it's just hard to imagine they go to Russ. If if they keep winning, it's just hard to imagine it being not Justin Fields for the foreseeable future. Um, I do like starting
How do you
Najee.
pull a guy when you're winning games?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it was a
Just
head to head. It's not like you had a star. It's not like when the Cowboys played with Cooper Rush and went on that winning streak
no,
and then Dak
yeah.
came back. It's not at all the same thing. So, yeah, we'll see. And the reason I mention that is I think Russ is a bit of a better passer than Justin Fields, but Justin Fields obviously offers a lot more with his legs and how the Steelers are kind of running their offense. Greg Roman, Justin Fields, Lamar. Obviously, not saying they're comparable, but the play style, the capability with the legs is what he's used to, familiar with. It kind of fits the style. Um, I think Najee's a solid start. He hasn't broken double digits, but he has gotten over 15 attempts both weeks, and he's been decently efficient. He's gotten a target out of the backfield both weeks, and he has not got in the end zone. If he happens to get in the end zone, he could have a very solid week. If not, he could still be decent, but I like him more than Jalen Warren in this one. Uh, George Pickens, man, it's just tough. He did get the Pat Surtain treatment last week, so I'm not holding him too much to that one. I think
The Chargers do have a very good pass rush. And
it
I think that could cause fits for Justin Fields,
for sure.
really limiting just that. Not saying he's not going to get anything, but I feel like it's going to be like last week.
And with how both these defenses play, and with honestly how the offenses play, I wouldn't be surprised either if it hit the under on that 36. So I'm limiting myself to the running backs if I can. And even if you have to go to a wide receiver two on a different team that is playing in a much more favorable and potentially higher scoring matchup, that may benefit you a lot more than sticking with pass catchers in this one that points just may not be scored. Um, and it's the same case. Chris Boswell, I mean, he's put up 35 points, fantasy points through 2 weeks. So if you want to go Chris Boswell, I don't blame you for it. And the Steelers' defense, I don't completely mind it either. The Chargers are smart. They don't put themselves in too many positions to get turnovers, but TJ Watt and that defensive line wreak absolute havoc. So I don't think it's the worst idea to start them. But that's really all I had. I think that one is going to be a disgusting game for fantasy owners outside of the defenses and potentially the running backs.
Yeah.
Our next game should be a bit higher paced. We have the Eagles going into New Orleans and taking on the Saints. The over-under is 49.5. The Saints are favored by 2.5. It is looking like Arthur Juan Brown will be missing another week with that hamstring injury. And this one's pretty simple for me on the Eagles side of the ball. I like Jalen Hurts, Saquon, and Devonta Smith. These are guys you just, no matter the matchup, you're not taking them out of your lineup. I like all three of those. Again, we just recapped Jahan Dotson, even Dallas Goedert. If I have a lot more hope for Goedert than any wide receiver two on this team, but even with him, it's just tough. It all depends. There's still some tight ends that are banged up, potentially missing. Evan Ingram, David Njoku. So,
Well, and Saquon Barkley is a prolific pass catcher. So it's like, how much do they really need a wide receiver to
yeah.
that? I mean,
The only reason I bring up Godare is
And it's
because
funny that I say that after his horrific drop in the last game, but still,
no,
like,
for sure, for sure. It's just the Saints' offense has been humming. Schiff will cover it, but I'm looking at it as we've seen the Eagles get lit up a bit through the past game. If the Saints are able to do that, and the Eagles are in a position where they have to pass, you have Devonta Smith, you have Saquon out of the backfield, you have the Britton Coveys on the Eagles that can snag some attempts, but I do think there is a realm where Dallas Goedert can get you, 4 or 5 catches, 40, 50 yards, and not dud you. He should at least be a
yeah,
safe start if you need to make it. So, but that's really it. I don't mind Jake Elliott
no, not at all. Probably would avoid the Eagles defense in
for
this
sure.
one. But going over to the Saints side of the ball, I mean, through the first 2 weeks, they're scoring 45 and a half per game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously first in the NFL, and they're only allowing 14 and a half points per game. But what I really want to kind of hone in on is the fact that they're rushing for 185 per game, and the Eagles are just giving up 300. They're pretty much 400 yards a game, like the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Based on what we've seen out of the Saints, if they are who we think they are through the first 2 weeks, then Alvin Kamara is an obvious start. That's not even a question at this point.
Yeah.
Chris Olave should be a smash start this week. I believe he could finish a top 5 wide receiver on the week.
Yeah.
Rashid Shaheed should easily finish in the top 24.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Carr should be a top 12 quarterback this week.
Yeah.
This is if the Saints are who we think they are through the first 2 weeks and the Eagles don't come out and. But we'll see. I mean, the Saints are favored by 2.5 points. Um, Truly, from what I've seen out of the Eagles defense, Jordan Love diced them up on that
Mm-hmm.
last most important drive of the game. They got torn to shreds. I mean, I think Derek Carr, with what he's been able to do over the top with Rashid Shaheed and just knowing the talent of Chris Olave, I think it should be a good game and the Eagles can keep up. So I do see this being a high scoring affair.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, starting Shaheed, Olave, Kamara, I think Carr is a good option this week. And then if you want to go like Blake Groupie, I don't hate that at all.
Yeah.
Probably staying away from the tight ends though in this one.
Yeah. I agree with that. And our next one should be a fun one. Schiff, if you want to take us into it.
Yeah, I mean, our next one, I feel like we saw what the Browns defense did to the Jaguars last week, and that was in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this week, the Giants are going to Cleveland. They weren't really able to do much against Minnesota in week one. I think it's going to be tough for them this week. I think that you can go ahead and, due to volume, start Devin Singletary, especially with all the injuries and,
Yeah.
you know, this running back wasteland
Mm-hmm.
is becoming. But I think Singletary is definitely startable. Obviously, a tough matchup this week. But Malik Neighbors, I don't think you're questioning at all.
Yeah.
Um, he's going to get the targets. Hopefully, he'll be able to come down with enough to make it a salvageable week because we know how tough this defense is. But Brian Thomas was able to grab a couple for 94 yards. I think Malik will have a decent enough day.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I'm not. I mean, I'm trying to win fantasy football games here, so I think we can kind of end it there.
Yeah,
As
for
far as
sure. And the Browns side of the ball, and again, this is as of Thursday night. David Njoku missed practice again today, so heavily monitor that. It looks like he may miss another week. And if he does, I mean, Jerome Ford, I would like to say, is going to have a solid game. The Browns should be ahead, so he should get some volume. We should see some Deontay Foreman. We saw a lot of him last week, but I don't mind Jerome Ford. Especially, I mean, it just depends. Yeah, if you're hurt by injury or whatever the case may be, I don't mind him if you have to plug him into the starting lineup. I'm not forcing him in there, but I do think he could have a solid week. I think this is the week Amari Cooper breaks out, which is sad for me because I chose Mondre over him and I instantly regretted it. This is a Giants defense where the Browns should be able to get on track to an extent. Without Njoku, Jordan Akins is not a filler for him. We saw the first game where he kind of got some volume, but then last game he got targeted one time. I think you can roll out Amari Cooper. And to be honest, if you tell me you're throwing Jerry Jeudy in at your flex, I don't hate you for it. I think
Nah,
his
he's had a
last
solid first two performances.
yeah, his last season in Denver kind of tainted the outlook on what we thought about Jerry Jeudy. He was a super highly touted receiver coming into the league. He's obviously crazy talented. And yeah, he's performed in his first 2 weeks in Cleveland, both double-digit finishes. So I think he can be a safe start. And I mean, outside of that, yeah, if you want to go Dustin Hopkins, kickers, I'm going to say this in a lot of matchups, especially if they're going against a favorable defense. If you're banking on the Browns being solid and you want to go Dustin Hopkins, go ahead. The Browns defense looked a lot better against Jacksonville than they did against Dallas, and I think they could look pretty solid against the Giants as well if you wanted to go there. So I don't mind any of those plays. Oh, this next one's a lot. This next one is Green Bay traveling to Tennessee and taking on the Titans. The over-under is 38, and Tennessee is favored by 2.5. I think that over-under will slightly come down if Jordan Love is unable to go, and it's Malik Willis. This offense obviously loses a lot of their passing ability against a defense that is number one against the pass. The Titans are only giving up 114 yards. I do think it would be a funny coincidence to see Malik Willis have to start against the Titans in Tennessee. That would be pretty crazy to see. The Packers are actually littered with injuries right now. Jordan Love is limited with that knee injury. Something to heavily monitor through the week is Jordan Love's availability. Josh Jacobs is limited with a back injury that he did have coming into last week, and we saw what he did. I think he will be completely fine. Tucker Kraft has a shoulder injury, and he has been limited in practice. And Jaden Reed also has a calf injury, and he's been limited in practice. So they're pretty banged up. Depending who you've been able to pick up, like in a lot of leagues, guys that lost Jordan Love were able to pick up a Baker Mayfield, a Jared Goff, a Derek Carr, guys like this that became available, especially a Baker or a Derek Carr at this point. I don't mind even if Jordan Love plays in this one if you stuck with a Baker Mayfield or a Derek Carr for this week. The Titans defense is very good. I don't know, after you declare Jordan Love having an MCL sprain and him missing 1 week and then coming back against the number one pass defense, I don't know how his mobility is going to look. They said even if he's 70 to 80%, he has the potential to play. So I don't blame you if you don't force him back into the lineup over hot hands, which have been, the Baker Mayfields, the Derek Carrs who've been performing well. Either way, I like Josh Jacobs. His volume alone is going to be huge. I will say I'm heavily looking at Jaden Reed. If Jordan Love is able to go, I obviously like him more than if he is unable to. We were hoping we would see some dynamic plays from Jaden Reed this past week. And on the ground, I mean, he got 37 yards on his 2 rush attempts, but through the air, he only caught 2 passes on his 2 targets.
There just wasn't much to go around.
And their defense was so good that they didn't necessarily have to pass, and that very well could be the case.
And the Colts could not stop the run.
That's what I'm saying. And it could be the case in this one. Like, I don't see the Titans scoring a whole bunch on the Packers after the Colts were unable to. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how the game script goes. If there is a pass catcher I like the most, it's obviously Jaden Reed there. We saw Christian Watson be non existent. Romeo Dobbs got a bit of consistency. I'm pretty sure, yeah, he caught 3 targets for 62 yards. It heavily depends on if Jordan Love goes. He's obviously a much better passer than Malik Willis.
Yeah, that goes without saying. And into the other side of the ball, I think um, they're going to have watched the film of last week
Yeah.
and watched how the mistakes that Anthony Richardson made kind of kept them out of that game. Honestly, Jonathan Taylor was up over 100 yards in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they gave up over 100 yards in week one to Saquon Barkley. I do think Tony Pollard is
Yeah.
going to have a good game. I think the recipe to success for Tennessee is keep the ball, not keep the ball out of Will Levis's hands, but limit the amount that he can hurt you. So I think when they start getting near the goal line, I think Tony Pollard's going to get. I think it's going to be a good game for him. I do see. I mean, he's had two top 24 finishes in the first 2 weeks, going up against a team that is giving up the world on the ground.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be good for him. And it's looking like Tyjae Spears is pretty banged up right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he should get a little more work. As far as the pass catchers, the only one I really like is Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
And while it's going to be tough with the Jair Alexander coverage, he just he has that deep threat ability that he showed. I mean, that catch between the two guys, they didn't even think he caught it, and he rolled into the end zone.
Yeah.
So I think the connection that him and Levis have could, equate to something in this one. Other than that, I'm not really starting any Titans pass catchers. It's really only um, Tony Pollard
And Calvin.
and Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
Can't really say I'm confident with too much else in this one. The Titans defense could be a good play because unlike the Colts defense, they are not porous to the run,
Mm-hmm.
and their pass rush is actually pretty disgusting.
Yeah. And our last one of the morning segment.
Oh yes. We have another battle of two 2-0 teams, one of them a lot more expected than the other. Houston going into Minnesota, where
Mm-hmm.
Houston is favored by 2 points, projected point total of 46. I think it could be tough for Houston, much like it was last week. It's going to be a tough defense. I think that Minnesota proved that going up against San Francisco. While they didn't have McCaffrey last week, Debo was full go. Ayuk was a full go. So it was, I mean, Kittle got banged up, but he came back. Um, they got to Purdy, and that's a good offensive line. I think it's going to be tough for Stroud in this one. He's on the road against a tough defense. I'm not jumping to put Stroud in my lineup this week. I think there might, I mean, I'm not necessarily, going out and trying to start Derek Carr over him,
Yeah.
but I don't think he's going to have the best week. Just seeing how he performed against the Bears last week at home, this one on the road against another very tough defense that while he is mobile in the sense that he can get out of the pocket and make plays, he does not run. So I just think it's going to be a challenge for him. And although I'm saying that, I have absolutely no problem with Nico Collins week in and week out. Wide receiver one, no question about that.
Yeah.
If you want to throw um, Cam Akers out there,
Joe can't go.
I mean, It is kind of gross, but I do think he'll get the majority of the work on the ground.
Yeah.
Aside from that fumble, he didn't look awful, but he did fumble, so that is awful. You'd like to hope that he doesn't do that again, but hopefully, for the purposes of having an actual startable running back, Joe Mixon is able to go. Um, Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. I mean, Diggs, you're still just putting in your lineup where you drafted him. You know you're going to get the volume.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, it ends up coming with a touchdown this time. We talked about how to have a good game from Stephon Diggs. It's likely going to need to come with a touchdown at this point. And then Tank Dell, we're just hoping that, hope this is the week where it picks up.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think I'm rolling Kamai Fairbairn, and it's tempting to roll the Texans defense because they do have a pretty dangerous pass rush. Um, but I don't know. I think there might be better options this week.
Yeah. And that starts me off with the Vikings side of the ball and Sam Darnold, who is currently the quarterback 10. He's had 2 solid weeks. He just played well against the 49ers. I do think you should have better options than Sam Darnold, but if you're in a deep league and you have to throw him out there, I don't absolutely hate it, but I do think there's better options. Uh, the two guys, you're obviously starting Jettas. He did have that quadricep injury. He has been practicing in a limited fashion. Jettas, when asked if he would play against the Houston Texans, said, "Yeah, for sure." I think he's going to be out there, and he kind of has to be out there for them because Jordan Addison did not practice again. It does not seem like he is going to play in this one, and obviously, if he is not, they're heavily going to need Jettas to stay competitive. Aaron Jones had a terrible rush week against the Niners, did get it done through the air. With his pass catching ability alone, I think you roll out Aaron Jones, you roll out Jettas, and outside of that, I mean, if you're really backed against a wall and you have to go Sam Darnold, I don't hate it. But outside of that, think, I just don't think we can roll out Jalen Naylor. I know he caught the touchdown. He's caught a touchdown in both games. But Houston does have a pretty stout defense. This could be a game where more defense is played than we think. But if the Texans do go up and you think that's how the game script's going to go, Jalen Naylor could be involved. He only saw 4 targets, but there's really no one else there.
Yeah, especially if Addison isn't able to go. I think
He's the
if
wide
you need the
receiver
spot
too.
start for Naylor, then I don't hate that at all.
No, but I mean, outside of that, I don't really like the Vikings kicker. I just think, I mean, I like him. I think there's better options this week. And then the Vikings defense is actually number 1 in the league. They did play the Giants week 1, but we saw them get after Brock Purdy. They had a solid game. So if you have them, or if you want to pick them up and run the risk, I don't completely hate it, especially if Joe Mixon misses. But just beware.
Yeah, I mean, we did see the Bears defense hold them to 1 touchdown last week, and that was in Houston. This is on the road in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
They've got obviously a lot to play for. Looking to get that 3-0 start, prove everybody wrong. So it wouldn't be the worst start.
Yeah. That
But
is it.
yeah, with that, that'll do it for our morning slate of games. We will be back with the afternoon, Sunday night, and we have 2 Monday night games this week.
Yeah.
For what reason?
Who knows?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I have
It's
no
probably
idea.
some streaming rights thing.
Yeah,
Realistically, that probably is the reason.
that's probably accurate. But one thing we do know is that you need to come back next time and take more reps with the first team.
Yes, sir.